Okay, so this lesson is going to still solve quadratic equations. However, we're going to be using the quadratic formula today. So whenever you use the quadratic formula, your equation must be in standard form. If it's not, you need to rearrange it first. And then the number that's in front of the square term is your A. The number in front of the X is going to be your B, and then the constant is going to be your C. So now we're just going to do examples. We're going to pull out the A, B, and C, and then we're going to go ahead and plug it into the formula. So here is my first example. It's already in standard form for me. So I'm going to pull out my A value, which is a 1. My B is the -4, and C is +2. Let me go ahead and write the formula up here. I like to think of this instead of -b, I say the opposite of b, and then plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c, all under the radical, divided by 2 times a. Now, you might have learned in your Algebra 1 class that b squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. And that discriminant would tell you how many solutions you have, but we're not worried about that right now. So let me go ahead and replace my a, b, and c now into the formula. So again, I think of it as the opposite of b. So b is -4, so I put in +4. If you'd rather think of it as putting it in -4 and then negative becomes positive, you can do that. And then this is b squared, so it's -4 squared minus 4 times a times c. And that's all under the square root symbol, divided by 2 times a. This is going to give me what x equals. I need to simplify what's under the radical first. So I'm going to go ahead and follow order of operations here. I'm going to go ahead and evaluate the -4 squared, which gives me +16. Now, when I go to do the -4ac, I take this as a -4. You could take it as a +4, but then leave the subtraction. But for me, it's easier to multiply -4 times +1 times +2, and that gives me -8. And then it's under the radical, divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Do not try to simplify the fraction until after you break down the radical. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify what's under the radical. 16 minus 8 is 8. Again, do not simplify the 4 and the 2 yet. We need to break down the square root of 8 first. You can do a factor tree, 2 times 4. If you recognize 4 is a perfect square, square root it. So now I have x is equal to 4 plus or minus 2 square root 2 over 2. Now I simplify the fraction. These can all be divided by 2. So this becomes a 2, a 1, and a 1. So my final answer is x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And again, WebAssign will ask you to pull it apart. So 2 minus square root 2, and then 2 plus square root 2. And these are your values of x. Number 2, it's already in standard form. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my a value, which is 1, my b value, which is -3, and my c value, which is -2. And again, I'm plugging them in to the quadratic formula. So the opposite of b, or -3, turns +3, and then -3 squared minus 4 times a times c, all under the radical, divided by 2 times a. I'm going to simplify what's under the square root. -3 squared is +9. And again, I am going to multiply this as a -4 times +1 times -2, which gives me +8. divided by 2. I now need to simplify what's under the radical. So 3 plus or minus the square root of 17 over 2. Nothing simplifies. I can't break down the radical. So for the test, this answer is acceptable. However, for WebAssign, remember we got to separate it. 3 minus the square root of 17 over 2, and then 3 plus the square root of 17 over 2. Now, the next one, we need to clear the fraction. I also need to put it in standard form first. If you try to put fractions into the quadratic formula, you're going to have a nasty mess. Okay, do not try to use fractions in the quadratic formula. Clear the fraction first. First step is to put it in standard form. So I need to subtract the 3, and I get 2/3 x squared minus 1/4 x minus 3 equals 0. I now need to look for my LCD, which is going to be 12. So I'm going to multiply each fraction by that LCD. So for the first one, notice the 3 and the 12 will simplify, and this will become a 4, and this is a 1. So now I just do 4 times 2, and this gives me 8x squared. Then I'm going to go to the blue. The blue simplifies, and this becomes a 1, this becomes a 3. So then 3 times 1x is just negative 3x. And then next I'm going to multiply, nothing to simplify on the purple, so 12 times 3 is 36. I now can pull out my A, B, and C value. So my A is the 8, my B is the negative 3, and my C is the negative 36. Now it's nice and easy. I have integers. I can plug it into the quadratic formula. So the opposite of B, opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, and then negative 3 squared minus 4 times A times C. That's all under the radical over 2 times A. This one's kind of big. All right, so 3 plus or minus 9, and then 4 times 8, negative 4 times positive 8 times negative 36 is going to give me 1,152. And then 2 times 8 is 16. 9 plus 1,152 is going to give me 1161 over 16. Now, we need to break that 1161 down. Now, I'm going to use a divisibility rule that I probably have seen taught to 4th graders. And what I do is I use the trick for 9 to see if 9 is a factor of it. And what I do is I take the number 1161, I add the digits, 1 plus 1 plus 6 plus 1, and then when I get that, I get 9. And because 9 will divide into 9, I know 9 is a factor of the 1161. Okay, so I'm going to do 1161, and then when I divide it by 9, I get 129. Well, 9's already a perfect square. The 129, I can still break that down into 3 times 43. However, 43 is prime, so I'm just going to multiply it back. So in simplest radical form, 1161 is 3 square root 129. So then my final answer here is going to be 3 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 129 over 16. And again, for WebAssign, you're going to need to pull it apart. First thing I need to do is make sure it's in standard form. Notice everything's equal to 0, but I need to switch these two. Otherwise, I'm going to be plugging in the wrong B and C. So in standard form, it's actually x squared plus 8x plus 10. I didn't do any kind of inverse operations. I just switched the order here. So my A is 1, my B is 8, and my C is 10. And now I plug it into the formula. So opposite of B, negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared, 4AC, all under the radical, divided by 2 times A. Simplify what's under the square root symbol. 8 squared is 64. Negative 4 times positive 1 times positive 10 is negative 40. Subtract, and x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus 24. Again, do not try to simplify this first. You must simplify the radical first, then simplify the fraction. So here, I can break down the 24. Do a factor tree here over to the side. So when I break down the 24, I can break it down into 2 and 12, 3 and 8. I'm going to do 4 and 6. And then it turns into 2 radical 6. Now that the radical is simplified, now I have negative 8 plus or minus 2 square root 6 over 2. Now I can simplify. So then this becomes a 1, this becomes a 1, this becomes a negative 4. So now my final answer is x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 6. Again, web assign, we'll expect you to pull it apart and do negative 4 plus square root 6 and negative 4 minus square root 6. One last one. Now, this one is a little different. You may look at it and say, wait a minute, I can use the square root method. We cannot because we have an x on this side. So I actually have to write down this binomial twice or use the pattern. I gotta FOIL it. So then this will become x squared plus 6x plus 6x plus 36. Then I'm gonna combine those middle terms. And then I move the 2x over. I need to get it equal to 0. And now x squared plus, that should have been a negative 2x. Be careful what you write. Then I'm going to add 2x, so that should have been a 14x plus 36 equals 0. Now I've got a quadratic equation that I can put into the quadratic formula. My A is 1, my B is 14, and my C is 36. So now I can plug it in. Opposite of B, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, all under the radical, 2 times a. Negative 14 plus or minus, 14 times 14 is 196, and then 4 times negative 4 times positive 1 times positive 36, negative 144. Do not simplify the 14 and the 2 yet. Subtract first, and I get 52. I can simplify, do a factor tree. I know that 4 times 13 will give me 52. So 2 square root 13 is the square root of 52 simplified. So x is equal to negative 14 plus or minus 2 square root 13 over 2. Now simplify. So divide all these by 2. This becomes a 1, and a negative 7. So final answer, negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 13. And again, web assign, pull it apart. So on the test, you can leave it plus minus, web assign, pull it apart. Don't forget the plus minus signs. When I give you back that quiz, some of you, when you did the square root method, forgot the plus minus sign. So technically you were missing one of the answers, okay? So just be careful. Don't forget about the plus minus sign if you keep it together. Anybody need me to go back to anything? I know I went kind of quickly, okay? Be able to clear fraction and use the quadratic formula.